The world is full of diamonds and gems, and we are having one of them here today to build this event. With these words, I, Ambuj, along with my co-host Devanshu, would like to give a heartiest welcome to Sarthak Gupta Bhaiya and all my friends present here in this wonderful event.
A negative mind will never give a positive life. With these words, I would like to introduce you all to Satya Gupta Bhaiya, a senior who is currently studying computer science and engineering from IIT Bhubaneswar and is an awesome coder. He is a 7-star coder on CodeChef in just second year and a candidate master on Codeforces. I request Ambuj to please enlighten us with his great achievements.
Sarthak Bhaiya's achievements are really awesome and inspiring to us. He is a true source of motivation for all of us. Now I would like to quote his great achievements to you all. Sarthak Bhaiya secured a global rank of 84 in round H and a global rank of 456 in round G of Google Kickstart in March 2020 to November 2020. He, he also secured a global rank of 247 in round 1 and a global rank of 821 in round 2 of Facebook Hacker Cup, which organized in July 2020 to September 2020. He is a 7-star coder on CodeChef and a code master and a master on Codeforces with a max rating of 2182. Now I would Now I would request Sarthak Bhaiya to please enlighten us about his journey, how he became such an awesome coder, and guide us with his great knowledge on competitive programming.
Okay, guys, so I would like to. Can you hear me? I'm audible? Hello?
Yes, Bhaiya.
I would like to begin with a few myths that I had along the way when I was starting competitive programming. Few of the questions that obviously come to mind are why do you need competitive programming and what is competitive programming? To understand that, I'll try to explain with the larger picture here. Most of us do competitive programming in order to get jobs, or we even go to get colleges to build careers, right? So when you're going to be a software engineer or a developer, you're going to take on projects that are going to be a lot larger in scale than what you're going to take in college. So when you take up college projects, they're going to be shorter and you'll probably be doing them without any knowledge of DSA, and it'll be perfectly fine knowing some basic libraries and you'll be able to do them. But when you try to get into the actual world and take on bigger projects, you'll need data structures and algorithms. So what the key difference here is, when product based companies hire you, they're looking for you to take on these projects. Now when you take on these projects, data structures and algorithms are needed there. So basically, these companies do not look for CP in particular. They look for data structures and algorithms. That is what you're going to need. Now, where CP comes into place is because CP, as of today, is the most popular way of dealing with data structures and algorithms. It is actually a very fast way to learn data structures and algorithms. To give you a brief, I would say that in your college courses, you'll probably have 2 to 4 sems of data structures and algorithms, which are basically given 2 or 3 names. But what I believe is, when you do competitive programming, you can master that knowledge given 6 months of ample time. That's how little time it takes in CP. Also, for product-based companies or even service-based companies, CP becomes an easier way to test data structures and algorithms, and the most efficient one right now. Where this comes into step is when you take on giants like Facebook or Google or Microsoft, for example, fan companies. Basically, they actually require these structures. When you're going to take on projects in these companies, you're going to require a lot of them. So you could say these guys are the trendsetters. So most of the companies would follow a CP-oriented coding interview or test sort of thing. When you're going to go for your internships or even sit for placements, you're going to get, for the first round is generally a coding test, which is basically essentially 3 questions of CP. So that is where CP gives you the advantage. In particular, I could say, I know for certain that when you give Google and Microsoft interviews, there are like 3 to 4 rounds, and all of those rounds consist of at least one CP question, and it will take you about 30 to 40 minutes. That's the level of the questions they're going to ask. Now, I'll start by how my journey in CP began was. Basically, we have a coding club in IIT Bhubaneswar, so I had an induction test for it. That was the first time I got to know about CP. In particular, that was my first contest, so I knew nothing of CP. Just like any newcomer would, I would brute force the codes and get none of the test cases passed. So that day, what I did was sit with some of my friends who actually knew something about it, learned what CP was, and eventually got to know that I could be good at it. To give you a background, why I could be good at it was because I'm good at maths. Particularly, I cleared Olympiads in my plus one, plus two. The regional I even qualified for RMO, and that's why I had a good mathematical background to back it up. So I understood that I could practice CP easily. Over the next few months from October 2019, I gave my first long challenge and I was able to solve 6.5 out of 8 questions in Div 2, which was great for first timers. Then I had exams in November. Using that as an excuse, as any first year would, I did not do any CP. After that, that was the only challenge that I had ever missed, any long challenge. And from that there onwards, including the December 2019 challenge, I've given all of the long challenges till date. I might not have given them from the same current ID that I own right now, but I used to give all of the challenges without a break. Now, my strategy was that when you solve questions, I did not believe what everyone else was doing, that you could solve n number of questions and get good at CP. What I always used to follow, that you need to do solve lesser number of questions that make you think. You cannot that they're not questions that you can solve in given half an hour or 1 hour. The questions that are actually going to make you learn something. So each long challenge that I solved, I was gradually seeing progress, that each long challenge I could grasp 2 to 3 more questions. So you could see that within in the December challenge, I was able to solve all 8 in Division 2, and from there onwards, within 4 to 5 months, I was able to solve all of them in Division 1 as well. So what basically works is, I try to take up from the list that a friend of yours suggested. For the roadmap, I suggest for competitive programming, it's to give you a brief. What I suggest is you break down your CP into 2 parts. Firstly, you've got to be good at maths. I'll explain why maths, and you've got to be good at data structures and algorithms. What most people miss is they focus only on the data structures and algorithms part, because that is what is essentially required afterwards. But when you look at competitive programming, you've got to be good at maths. Now, to explain why maths is needed, I'll cover first of the basic computer fundamentals that are needed. When you look at computer science, what makes sense is that it's going to be involved morely in computers and there's nothing behind the scenes. But when you actually come down to computer science, it can be broken down to some algorithmic problems that you take out of the machine and can be solved on paper pen. That is what actually CP essentially boils down to. So you've got to be good at maths, because when you're solving a problem on a paper and it'll require some kind of aptitude or some kind of mathematical background, it becomes easier that way. So now, to elaborate on the maths part, on a practical point of view, this was a theoretical point of view. On a practical point of view, I know a friend of mine who's just good at maths. He does not know DSA. For those of you who do not know, Codeforces is a very good site for competitive programming. As of today, it's probably the most recognized ones by Google or Microsoft. And I'll explain why I think they're the most recognized ones. But there's a friend of mine that is only good at maths. He does not know DSA. And even as of today, he's able to solve first 3 questions on Codeforces Division 2 round faster than I can. So that is how important I can say maths is in CP. Apart from that, why I think product-based companies do care about Codeforces ranks is because I applied for step intern for Google last year. And what essentially it boiled down to, you need referrals. For those of you who do not understand what a referral is, when applying for a position in a company, basically it's good to have a recommendation from someone who's already working for the company. So that is basically what a referral is. So on a general case, if you do not know someone from the company, what you essentially do is you try to find people on LinkedIn and message them that this is my resume, this is why I feel I'm good for the role. If you could please give me a referral regarding the same. So what essentially I could realize is nobody gave a real, even a glance at what my resume was. Most of them, at least the ones I got a referral from, only gave me one message, that what was your Codeforces profile, what was your CodeChef profile, And there was even a guy from Google who asked me to fill a form that specifically just asked me to fill a few of my ratings and CP skills. So that is the amount of importance that CP has. Apart from that, I applied for Quora. I did not actually exactly apply for Quora. I took part in the Quora challenge this year in March, I guess, and I had a pretty decent rank in that. I had an overall global 66 rank. So what eventually happened was, they approached me for a full-time role instead of an internship, which obviously I could not take because I'm still in second year. But I understood that that was the amount of respect that these companies are willing to give to CP, that they're essentially only looking for that. They're okay with teaching you all of the rest if you're good at something. So what eventually it boils down to is, you've got to do CP even if you don't like it. It's better to do it than not to. If you still do not feel comfortable with CP after a month or two, maybe it's not for you, but you'll have to do it. So what I suggest for those people who do not want to do CP and realize it after 1 or 2 months, it's good that you realize that something's not for you. But what essentially is, you're going to have to cover something up. That there are friends of mine who are not interested in CP, but they've got to cover some parts so that they acquire that knowledge that is not there in CP. So what they essentially do is, they'll solve a number of questions in lead code so that at least you're good with the coding rounds, and at least have some basic knowledge of CP. Then they will probably make better projects than any of us would. They'll focus more on the development side, and that actually is a good strategy, because what I suggest is, in the end, your goal is to be a good developer. So when CP is a good way to help you do that, but it's not the only way. Realizing that is important. uh, Focusing on the maths part, I suggest I'll give you an example that what all maths parts are required and what are the myths related to maths basically. See, in maths, basically in CPU, you're supposed to be very good at PNC, in number theory, in game theory, and probably problem solving skills and aptitude skills always helps. So what it essentially boils down to is, I probably believe that all of you must have given JE. So you had PNC in that, and some part of number theory, even though you do not realize it, you did. So game theory, I'm pretty sure none of you had. So what essentially it boils down to is, there is myth that people from first tier colleges or second tier college, like IITs and IITs, are entitled to get good jobs from Google and Microsoft and so on. Basically, it's not that. There, essentially, what it comes down to is, people, if you look at the top charts from CP and Codeforces or CodeChef, you'll realize that most people are from these colleges. The reason simply is that these guys are not that they're getting way good guidance. It's nothing like that. They're very good at maths, so they have an advantage, and they take that advantage to the next level. That's all that there is. So what I suggest is that, when you if you take on CP seriously, focus on these three topics as hard as you can, because most of, I believe, at least I had all of these three in my courses. I'm not sure what your coursework is, but if you do practice them there. If you don't, take some resources from someone. I could provide you with the resources or the internet, and try to study them. Most of these resources are given in CP Algo, Geeks for Geeks, and when you're solving problems, you'll find them. Now, another thing that comes up is upsolving. So basically, what you're going to need is, when you're giving any contest, you're going to have to solve more and more number of questions. So when you solve more and more number of questions, what will happen is, you're going to essentially feel that there's a lot of questions that you cannot solve. Start reading their editorials. Start reading editorials. There are two reasons people obviously know that you have the solutions and do not read it. The first and foremost reason is, it's hard to understand them. Even after I had a pretty good mathematical background, for the very first time or for few months, when I used to read editorials, or even I read editorials of Division One right now from Codeforces, it hardly makes sense. Okay, it'll not make sense. A few reasons for that is, the writing style from ours is way different. They'll write a lot formally, and probably most of the topics that they give, some of them are way above our heads. So what I suggest is, when you put yourself through that pain of learning, going through those editorials, you'll get the hang of that formal language. what I'll eventually help you in is proving any basic intuition that you come up with. To give you a few examples, what you'll realize is that you sometimes have a gut feeling that this answer is right, or you know a few of the answers and you try to make a pattern out of it. So what I today would do is, whenever I figure such a pattern out, I'll try to prove that that pattern is right. More than often it so comes out is that either that pattern was wrong and I'm able to prove that, or I'm able to prove that using that pattern I'm able to prove that some solution is right and some is not, and whatever isn't I'm able to move to that part very quickly. Now what would happen is, when you are able to do that, you'll be able to solve problems with more efficiency, because you'll not be in a way that maybe this is correct or maybe this isn't correct. When that happens is, you'll probably be able to put the computer's problem down and break them down easier, in an easier way. um, Give me a sec. So I'll also explain how building confidence in CP works. And basically, what building confidence basically boils down to is having a good peer group, which essentially boils down to in having a good coding society. From my personal experience, I never had a very good coding society. It's just people believe that I had a good induction, so probably I'll have a good coding society. Is nothing like that. Before me, if you check the records, there's not even a 6 star from my college. And essentially, when I went to my college, I had all these doubts that why do CP, and when I figured that you need to do CP, that then I figured why doesn't anyone in my college do so. So what it boils down to is, most people do not want to do CP because they feel that they have an easier way out. But what I would suggest is, CP gives you an advantage, so you should take all the advantage that you can get. You might get into a good company without it, you might not. So taking CP seriously at least give you some kind of advantage over that, because it makes you stand out. Uh, the other things I suggest about a coding society is, basically it takes only one person to start a coding society or a coding culture. When that one person is enough, it only takes 5 people or maybe 6 people to continue that coding culture. How I explain that is, essentially when I joined my college, there is no coding culture, essentially zero. Basically when I started to progress and excel in CP, more people followed. I'm not the only 7 star from my college, and this is something I'm proud of, that there's another friend of mine just like me, same hard work, and he also is a 7 star. There's another person and he's a 6 star. So what essentially happens is, when someone is progressing and you're taking your peers along with you, it brings all of your momentum. What would happen is, when you're solving contests daily, questions daily, you'll obviously hit a low point. You'll obviously feel that there's a need to quit, and that's always there. But when your friends or peers that are doing that with you, you always have the motivation to continue. That's essentially what coding culture gives you. And also it gives you a platform to discuss, because discussing on the internet might feel very cool in the first, but it's not. I'll tell you, in the long run it doesn't feel any good. But when you're talking to your friends about problems that you've encountered in CP and new algorithms that you learn, it actually gives you a more fluent way to transfer your information and learn what's actually learned by you and what's not. What other things in coding culture follow is that, basically whenever two people learn something, if you're learning them parallelly, you'll probably, all of you will take 3 to 4 years to get anywhere, to be good at CP. But let us suppose that you're like 4 or 5 friends who are doing CP continuously day in day out. So what essentially you could do is that, suppose that, let us say person A has learned a few some new algorithms. He could test them out by teaching B, C, and D. What that would do is that not only benefit B, C, and D, that also benefit A. Because when you teach something, you realize that something is more. Okay, just a sec. I got a question. Language I prefer is C for CP is C++. I'll come to that. That's actually a good question, and I'll give my logic for that also. uh, Basically what it comes down to is A, B, C, D. Think of it as in what happens in your exam. I'm pretty sure you're first year, so you're not familiar with this. But when you go to college, you'll realize that this is actually a more important phenomenon that you realize. Uh, what would happen is your professor would be teaching you things for like 3 months, and he'll teach you lots of stuff. He'll probably teach you 300 to 400 pages of garbage, and what your friend will break down to is he'll probably condense that information to about half an hour to 1 hour. Your intelligent friend, and he'll convert that information into half to 1 hour. He'll explain it to you one night before the exam, and you'll make pretty decent exam. You'll have a pretty decent exam on the next day. So that is something I want people to realize, is that when you're learning something from your peers, it's way faster and efficient than learning something from scratch. So this is why nice having good seniors also comes into place, because let us suppose you're learning something, you're under the wing of some senior, and the way amount of knowledge that person has is something that you will be able to convert to your knowledge very quickly than what you would have searching randomly through internet. Now I'll come to the question that which language I prefer and why. See, I prefer C++ for CP, and my reason for that is basically C++ is way faster than any of the languages. To give you an exact comparison, it's like 2 to 3x faster than Java. It's 5x faster than Python. Now, what would happen is sites like CodeChef do give you that multiplier. So let us suppose that the time limit for C++ for solving a question is, let's say, 1 second. The same time limit for solving that question for Python would be 5 seconds. Even though it's not mentioned, they have a 5x multiplier. But then there's competition that won't have that multiplier, and you'll be left on a disadvantage. To give you a few examples, Facebook Hacker Cup, Google Kickstart, Google CodeJam do not give you those multipliers, and they're very essential competitions. So you cannot obviously rely on slower languages if you're not okay with that disadvantage. Secondly, the community is mostly C++ driven. So finding most good resources in Java and Python is a headache. You'll find some basic resources that give you a good knowledge about basic structures like links, linked lists, stacks, queues. But when you want to go one step further, you'll not find any of these things. Now I'll tell you how much time it'll take to achieve 4 to 5 stars. Well, essentially that any type of achievement boils down to three things. How badly do you want that thing? So that's where your dedication comes in. How good of a path have you selected? And thirdly, how good of a background you have. Most people don't realize is that having a good essential fundamental background also gives you an advantage to learn things faster. So what I suggest for people is to build that background first rather than starting randomly. Like, if you want to compare it to my knowledge, it took me about, I guess, 4 months to reach 5 star. I'll say 4 months, 4 months tops to reach 5 star. So what that boils down to is it's not exactly 4 months, because as I said that I did not have to cover any of the mathematical background that CP offered. So you could say 2 to 3 months extra will take you to do that, minimum, bare minimum. Or if it's like an average case, if you're really good at maths or grasping things, it'll take you maybe about 1 to 2 months if you're really good at it. But that's a rare case. In a general case, it takes a lot of time. So do not put pressure on yourself about ratings or ranks. Try to learn, because at the end of the day, if you're really good at CP, you'll get those ratings and competition ranks eventually. Oh, okay. To explain my exponential curve, it's not exactly exponential. I explain why both of my CodeChef and Codeforces curves are almost exponential. Reason for that is those curves are more probably from around September or mid-August, and I had an account before those. I did not know at the time what plagiarism was, so I had multiple accounts, not even two. I will say I had multiple accounts, and I would essentially submit the same solution from all of those accounts, because at some point I would run out of the number of submissions. That's how badly I did CP. I remember in the December challenge, I submitted about 350 solutions for the challenge problem in Division 2 from various IDs. It's 100 tops. So you shouldn't be doing that. I did not know what plagiarism was at that time. So all of my accounts got banned, and I had to delete any of them that was left. So I started from scratch. So essentially, they're not exponential curves. If you realize that you could scale them up by a factor of like 2 to 3 times. Yeah, but I would say that essentially what I believe is how I got there was I actually had a better path than most people have. My strategy simply was that if I continuously build towards solving good number of good questions, not a lot of questions, but good questions, I'll eventually get there. Essentially, what people will tell you is you got to know a lot of data structures and a lot of algorithms. I'll tell you from my point of view, that's not essentially true. If you ask me how many data structures I know, apart from STL, I only know one data structure, two tops, and one of them is actually never used in practical life. One I know only segmentary and split trees, but split trees are not practically used, and not in a live contest that I've yet to give, and segment trees are very widely used. But what I'll suggest is why I only study segment trees except STL is because I'm very good at segment trees. If any question can be solved by a segment tree, I can do it. I probably can compete with any red coder on Codeforce, even on Codeforce or art coder as well. If you give me a question which can be solved with segment trees, that's how good I got at segment trees. The reason I got to be that good was I used to solve problems. I used to look at other people's code. Now I'll cover that following good people also helps. Like you need to realize is that the people you follow, you need to follow them carefully because you cannot follow people that just randomly say that we're teaching you something and this is going to be good. Look at people that have already done something. I'll tell you the only two people I used to look at when I used to be in my initial first year. I used to look at William Lynn's code. He goes by the username TM William generally on CodeChef and Codeforces. I guess he also has a YouTube channel. And apart from that, I used to look at Eric To's channel once a while. And there's one guy named Tushar who has very good explanations on YouTube. The reason I followed all these three was Tushar had a very great way of explaining things. That's why I used to look at those. William Lynn is, even as of today, he's probably your age. And he has very good code writing style. If you look at his codes, it's probably even able. You will also be able to understand those. That's how simply he writes. There no hi-fi syntaxes involved. Okay, just a sec. Uh, what I suggest is it's hard for me to read all the messages. If you could just take turns and speak out your piece, it will be way faster. Currently, I'm learning DSA from Apna. Acha, the doubt that which course you should take and where you should learn, I'll not suggest any of those. The reason for that is I am not one in favor for paid courses. I never took any paid courses and I fared out pretty well. If you take any paid courses, I suggest you actually look into who's going to teach you, not what the branding behind it is, who's actually going to teach you and what his credentials are. Because what I realize is, interview bit a while back offered this type of opportunity, and that is something I actually preferred because what you eventually had was you'll get to select who your mentor is and what his credentials are. So any college or any course or any code that you pick up, make sure it's from a good source. The person who's teaching you should be qualified enough to teach you. See, some easier ways to go about without doing CP was it's a few ways with piggy riding. Piggy riding is basically someone from your college is good at CP, so on his behalf, some of the good companies would come in, and you'll also be allowed to sit for placements. So sometimes they hire more than the required people and you get a good shot on that. And then there's other ways to get around CP. The natural ways are to probably be good at the development side way than you would be at CP. So what they would have is they will have very good projects. They'll be good at hackathons. They'll probably have done a lot of open source coding, and they would have done a lot of lead code also. So probably what would happen is when you're good at CP, you'll obviously be able to solve any problem thrown at you. But when you're good at doing lead code and done a lot of questions, what would happen is eventually what interview questions you're going to get, you're already going to know it. So there's not a lot of brainstorming that's required. So you can go through that. Okay, so another way you can get around doing CP is probably if you have good campus placements, then you do not need to do that in some cases, because some companies do prefer some candidates without CP also, provided that they are very good at a few other topics that you'll go about learning in your third years and fourth years. Some of those, namely, are computer networks, operating systems, and probably OOPS concept. So if you're good at these, you'll be pretty well. Apart from that, I'll come back to a previous question that I actually did not complete. That why I do not prefer Java is I actually know how to code in Java. I do a lot of backend in Java as well. But why I don't do prefer? I had explained why I don't do CP in Java. But sometimes CP also helps you when you're applying. Doing CP in Java also helps when you're applying for companies that are looking for Java-oriented programmers. So in that case, if you know CP in Java, it's actually good. If you can actually give the code in the interview itself, it helps. So that's why sometimes people prefer Java, because placement point of view, Java is preferable than CP than C++. Okay. So to the point that people are facing difficulty at CF than CodeChef is because you probably don't have the enough mathematical background. That's nothing to be sad about. I'll give you a realistic analysis. I said I was good at maths. Doesn't mean even I'm perfect. When I gave my first CF contest, I'll tell you, I was only able to solve one question, that too in like 148 minutes. That was how long it took me to code my first question in Codeforces. So it is hard, and that was when I could solve all 8 questions in Division 2 long challenge. So that even when at that level I could solve only one question in Codeforces. So Codeforces is a little on the higher end, and you do not need to worry so much about if you're not able to do it. What you need to worry about is you need to be able to build that level gradually. So what I realized is that I was not as good as to participate in Codeforces. So what I eventually did was I used to focus on CodeChef. I used to try all past problems. I used to try problems that I could not solve, especially problems I could not solve. I used to learn new things. And once I got to a point where I was good at DP, greedy, and segmentaries, that's when I essentially started CF. Even then, like first 3 to 4 months, I barely managed first three problems, but eventually like mid June, July, I was able to come up with first 4 to 5 problems, and that's when you pick it up. So what would happen is the first three questions in CF are purely maths. Even if you're not good at DSA, you'll get them. If you're good at maths, observation, problem solving, aptitude, these are the tags most of those problems are. Few problems also involve DP and greedy, so you need to do those as well. And do not be hard on yourself if you are not able to do CF in the first try. You just need to keep a target that you can do it. So there's also a person that says that he's stuck at some ratings. So what I suggest is, in case you feel that you're stuck at some rating, uh, realize what your basic mistakes are. A few common mistakes that I felt was the most basic mistake, and why I tell people to focus on maths is I realized when I talk to third years or even fourth years, they have very good data structures and algorithm skills. Because they're there in your courses. So if I ask to algorithm on graphs also, they'll probably know it at least by name. But when I essentially ask them about some mathematical topics, they won't. So why you start at Codeforces is you'll realize that you don't have a habit of solving those questions that fast, because Codeforces only has time contest. So you have like 2 to 2.5 hours of solving questions in Codeforces. So that's some format you need to get used to, and you need to process gradually. You just can't keep on solving n number of problems, and even on Codeforces, try to solve first three problems, see where you lack, probably topic wise, or what your mistakes are. If you're weak in your syllabus, you need to practice more of the syllabus. In case you're not weak with syllabus and you feel that your timing is bad, you need to give more and more of virtual contests. That's the only way you're going to get through that. Okay, in initial stages, have you started with C, then you shift later C++, or only with C++? Essentially, I actually started with C++. I till date do not know the proper syntaxes of anything. I'll tell you my reason to that is basically whenever I come up with a problem, I told you I take out the problem, put it on a piece of paper, solve it like a math problem. When you figure out what the essential algorithm for the problem is or how your solution is going to go about, basically whatever syntax is going to be needed, and I do not know, I Google it. That's how I go about it. In the initial days, obviously, I cannot Google everything from scratch. So as I said, that I went to some of few of my friends who were good at CP. I used to ask them for the basic syntaxes. That's how I actually learned C++. When I came to college, I did not know C++. So how I learned C++ was through my friends because I had C++ in my second semester, not in my first semester. So first semester C++ was learned basically through my friends. That's why I essentially tell people that if you have a peer group, do make sure that all of you progress. Do not compete amongst yourselves. Discuss amongst yourselves. That'll probably give you more advantage. That'll eventually build a better coding culture for everyone to thrive in. How to create a back. See, basically, what I suggest for creating a background before CP is you can do it parallelly. It's not a big deal. I did it parallelly. Most a friend of mine was said it was 7 stars, 6 stars. Both of them also did it parallelly. How you can do that is basically you need to focus on three topics: number theory, PNC, and uh, game theory. So game theory you should tackle at last because that's something that will be completely new to you. Start with PNC because you still have that J advantage, which is why it is essential to start CP first year. Because when you're in your first year, you have that advantage of 12th and JE, of that mathematical advantage that you probably have more capacity to learn at that time. So that's why CP is intentionally done in first year and like first 2 years. That's mostly when CP is done on a very good scale. After that, you can focus on your development part because you'll be setting for internships. You'll need projects on your resume as well. Uh, for building that background, you could also do some things. Is you could filter out what you watch as in your free time. What I did was it's not exactly uh, compulsory to do it or suggested also. But this is what I do. I mean, my reason for that is I filter out garbage time that I have. Most people have garbage time of scrolling through memes or watching random YouTube videos. Even I have that, but not memes. Essentially, I have times where I would watch random YouTube videos. What I would do that would be that when I watch those random YouTube videos, I wouldn't watch them from a very vague channel. I would watch them from some mathematical channels and to name a few, there was Mathologer that I used to follow back in the time, and there was Michael Penn. I'll write to give you the links after in a few minutes. So basically, these when even watching these random videos and feeling that I'm not doing CP, essentially what would happen would be I started enjoying maths at one point. Even as of today, CP is not something that I totally have to do as work. I'll enjoy it. Sometimes I'll even do CP in my free time just because I have nothing else to do. Okay, diff 2 always A and B trying for so long to reach C and D. So basically, what I get from your message is that you're able to do A and B. So you're probably almost past that A and B factor. If you want to do C and D in diff 2, you've got to be good at DP and greedy. You've got to be essentially very good at those. What for those you could do is follow CP algo blogs. Those are very good. Or what you could also do is you could search for blogs on Codeforces. Codeforces also has a feature of giving you blogs about certain topics. That's how essentially people learn these days. Want to reach master max? I got is 950. How can I improve myself? See, basically, what I suggest is when you have such a low rating, just don't randomly give n number of contests. Start with realizing what your weaknesses are. Are you mathematically not strong enough? Are your data structures not strong enough? Or is your time efficiency not good enough? Or what happens is if see what would happen is when you're solving one problem, what would happen is you would come across two problems. One problem type would be that you cannot solve even given enough ample amount of time, or the other problems could be problems that you could solve given ample amount of time. So uh, I suggest that the problems that are type 2, which you can solve with ample amount of time, are things that you need not to be worried about. You'll get there eventually when you start getting those in time. But need to worry about are things that you cannot get in ample amount of time. When you problems that you essentially just cannot solve, it doesn't matter how much time you give in. So those are problems that actually help you build your repertoire of concepts. What I would suggest is, let's suppose you know n number of concepts. What essentially you should focus on is building those concepts in such a way that you're able to parallelly arrange any number of concepts. Let us suppose that you've learned DP and you've done some concepts on number theory. And if you get a question that is mixed on both number theory and DP, you should be able to do that. That's basically what this CP focuses on. That you are essentially allowed to break problems into smaller parts. Then you are allowed to collaborate multiple concepts that you learn. Once you get there, it'll be easier for you. Firstly, identify what your problem is. So basically, what I did was I realized what my problem was. I'm okay with maths, but my problem is I'm not okay with formal writing. I was not good at formal writing, and that is what I focused on. I read editorials, basically more and more number of editorials. I started actually writing on a piece of paper the same languages that they used to write. Some of the proofs that I figured out, and I used to write them formally. So what that would essentially give is, as of now, if I write an editorial, you couldn't make out if it's written by a professional or not. And other things is, I realized that if I'm not good at some data structures and algorithms, I only studied any data structure or new data structure and algorithm when I realized that using my existing, when I was definitely sure that using my existing knowledge of data structures and algorithms, this problem cannot be solved. When I was essentially sure of that, I used to learn that new algorithm with giving it ample amount of time. I could give it weeks to months. But when I was done with that algorithm, I was definitely done with that algorithm. I did not. I could solve any number of problems using that algorithm. If I said that I've done that algorithm. What do you do daily? See, basically nowadays, computer programming in my daily schedule is less. It's about 3 to 5 hours. But essentially, in first years, it was about 8 to 9 hours. 8 to 9 hours of CP. Yeah, it is that, and I'll explain how that came to be because it sounds like a ridiculous amount of time. But nowadays, essentially what happens is I learn a very few. I find very few questions that are that I cannot solve given ample amount of time. So what happens is I'm only giving live contests, and that's essentially what it boils down to: is how many number of contests I'm going to give daily. Suppose I have a contest of like 2 to 3 days a day. I'll do that and pretty much kickstarts and hackathons, and that's all. Um, See, basically, I say that there is no essential time to solve in CP. As a beginner, it's suggested that you only solve questions with editorials so that you're not vaguely around questions that do not actually even have a solution. But when you get to a good level, say about 2300 in CodeChef or 2000 in Codeforces, whatever suppose, you can probably take up questions that could take you 6 months or even a year to solve. I have questions that took me about 8 to 10 months as well. Um, See, basically, my approach for time limited contests was that essentially it does not matter that it's a time limited contest. My aim is to build my repertoire of knowledge. So I'll solve all six, I'll upsolve them. Let's just suppose that I was only able to do 3 questions in a contest of 6 questions. What I would essentially do is I would obviously not look at all 3 editorials because I know the fifth and sixth question won't even make sense to me. But I'll look at the fourth question. I'll even look at the first 3 questions that I could solve, because firstly that gives me a way to read those editorials and come around good approaches to know what the solutions, what different approaches to those solutions were, what different proofs to those solutions could be, and what's a better way to write them. Then what I would do would be read the fourth problem as well, try to come up with a solution, read the editorial. If any extra material is required, let us suppose that it's given that this problem is supposed to be solved with DP and I do not know what DP is, I'll probably Google that. And what I suggest is to, rather than randomly Googling, first try to Google it with under the label CP Algo, Geeks for Geeks, and Codeforces. If you cannot find that topic in these 3 sites, then you'll probably have to do a random Google search, and that's probably the only way we'll get through that. Um, uh, Time limit contests also have one crucial thing attached to them. Basically, time related contest when you actually giving for rating sakes. Because now when I give a contest, I purely give it for rating sakes and not essentially for learning. So when that happens, is everyone has their own strategy. My strategy is that if I'm able to solve one, two, and let's suppose I'm giving a diff to CF contest, I'll solve A, B, and then I'll solve in the reverse order, A, D, C, E, D, C, because I essentially believe that solving C for rather than solving C first, I'm confident enough that I can solve the E question. So I'll firstly focus on that because that gives you essentially more time. But that's basically what time contest ratings are. It's not what any general approach is. Everyone has their own approach in this case. You'll probably figure out one of yours when giving a lot of contests. Well, essentially, peer group basically, see, I'll say that I feel sorry for you guys because I it was easier for us to build a peer group because we used to go to college daily, so we met each other. We had a lot of big friend circles, so it was easy to build a peer group. But in your case, what I would suggest is because see, when you come to two, three agreements that if you collectively work as a batch towards achieving something, let's say even 10 to 15 people are doing CP, you'll attract a lot of more amount of companies that you would have done on your individual basis, competing with each other and not getting to that level. If you let us suppose, I'll give you an example. Uh, Coordination is a company that gives you a very good CTC, and it requires minimum you should be a master on Codeforces for them to even consider you to be their employee. They'll probably take your interview also, but they'll not consider you on a very good scale that you should have been regarding your skills and probably how much you could contribute in that company. But what it boils down to is, let us suppose that there are three masters in from your college by the time your placement times comes in. Then coordinations would have a special placement round for your campus itself. So that's probably something that you should work on, because when you increase, what would happen is, you see, these companies, when they're called to your colleges for placements, they don't come up randomly. All colleges submit that they have these achievements, their students have these achievements, and they know this, and you should come and pick up some talent. Some companies obviously come because they have a long-term standing relationship with the college, and some also come because there's actually good talent in the college. So basically, if you have actual good talent in the college, you'll attract a lot more number of companies that you would have otherwise. So focus on increasing your knowledge. Basically, give more. Even hackathons are very important for that regard. It's not CP related, and no, I'm not supposed to comment. But like development side, open source and hackathons, if done correctly, attracts a lot more people. Uh, that's probably all. I think I've cleared all of your questions for now. I'll cover anything. Basically, I can't suggest any courses because I hadn't taken any good course, so I've covered that. Um, I'll share the resources in the end. Basically, I have a PDF that'll have all the syllabus of CP, size that you could follow CP Algo and GFG. And Codeforces blogs are obviously good. That will help you give good background regarding this. Now, how much time you should devote and balancing between academics. Basically, your first year academics are totally garbage. I'll give you that, because the reason for that is you'll probably have only very few subjects of computer science actually related in your courses. The simple reason for that is uh, it's basically meant for everyone. First is meant for everyone, so it'll not be specific to you. I'm not sure if you follow that, but that's the general notion in Indian colleges. That it's a general year, so all subjects are taught at least to the basic level. So it's probably garbage. What I'll suggest is, even in second years or third years or in fourth years, the subjects that you think are actually important, like computer networks, operating systems, that are actually going to be used in your later life, or you're going to need it for some kind of projects you're going to do give them proper attention. Apart from that, do not take too much academic pressure. Your profs are not going to take your assignments that seriously as you think. Just submit your assignments on time. That's what I do. Take your exams seriously. 1 week prior to your exams, focus on your exams. Exactly, focus on your exams. Try to get a good grade as well. I'll tell you, CGPA is a question that actually comes into mind, and I'll tell you how that works is, in campus placements, you require a good CGPA to sit for interviews. Because if you have a CGPA below 7.5, you'll probably not be even be eligible to sit it for placements. And so 7.5 bare minimum, 8.5 suggested for campus placements. Now, when you're applying for companies outside of your campus, CGPA is not that required. CGPA is not actually even valued that much, because CGPA is relative to your college, so it doesn't give you any standing of when you're competing with people from outside of your college. But some interns do require CGPA. When you're applying for research interns, basically what a research intern is, let us suppose it's a machine learning research intern, Adobe Office, that for second years as well. So you require a very high CGPA for that. You'll require about 9.5 CGPA, or at least bare minimum 9 plus CGPA for that. So sometimes CGPA is required. You cannot completely neglect it. But what I suggest is, do not take pressure on academics, because it's obviously generally relative grading for CGPA. So what you know, what is exactly what your friends know, it's not that big of a gap. Most people would study just 1 week before exams, and that's probably enough time to study for exams. All of us do it. Even the topper of our batch would do it, and you just wouldn't figure it out. And 1 week prior to exams is almost enough to study. Do study topics that are actually important to you. Let's suppose in second year's first semester you have data structures and algorithms. That's what I had, and you want to learn that parallelly. Do that compulsorily, because that's something that's going to help you in your future life. Do not skip that. Let us suppose you going to be taught development sides. Let us suppose you're going to be taught MERN stack in your third year or second year. Do complete that. Do learn that with full faith and intention, because that helps. That'll be important in your future life. Um, so what I suggest is, basically, see, most people think that they're from a tier 1 college or a tier 2 college and tier 3 college, and there's certain myths attached to that. I try to clear some of them, that certain myths for them is because they essentially are already a little skilled at maths, have a good mathematical background, so get better at CP, get better recognition, and attract more companies. That's basically cycle. That's how it follows, and over turn it follows a positive cycle for them and a negative cycle for the rest of the people. If you try to build your knowledge enough without any negative backs, and you believe that you can do it, you'll definitely be able to do it. You just need to give ample amount of time, probably about 8 hours a day, solve good number of questions, and give enough time to yourself to think. Do not just take things for granted like you did in school time. Back in school time, you were taught to mug up things. CP and college are like related. In college, you're not supposed to mug up things, at least not 3 months prior to exam. If it's like 1 week prior to exam, you can probably mug up. But a long time in long term, college is meant to supposed to make you question things. So when you question things, you're supposed to not take things for granted. You can research on them, try to prove them, and as of now, you'll probably be good with calculus and basic algebra. So you have a lot of things, tools that you can use to prove things. Just don't take things that maybe these are true. Basically, for starters, I suggest you do CC for a good couple of days, until like now there are 3 divisions. So I suggest, like, you're almost good with division 2 on CC, then start with CF. You'll fare out good. On CF as well, give Div 3 contests, because Div 3 contests are less of maths oriented and twisted questions. Uh, that's more of like giving testing your actual knowledge. This is concept based. It'll mostly be almost the straight away question that anyone could ask. It has zero twist, and it's basically pure one concept. It's not even merging of more than one concept. Um, Long list, and there's obviously a long list of platforms that are there: Hacker Rank, Lead Code, and this Hacker Earth. But you do not need to do any of these. What I suggest is, and I shouldn't be, but CC and CF are enough. That's the ones I suggest. I always suggest. The reason is because CC is like the most recognized Indian brand, and you obviously need recognition, and that's probably the one you would prefer. It has a great community as well. CF has a better community, more reach. It's a global brand, so you need to do that, because in case you're applying for global companies, that has a lot of value to it. Apart from that, two platforms is enough. In someday, let's suppose you probably go ahead of me, so you'll probably move to platforms like AdCoder. That's the platform even beyond CF. That's platforms where probably even I would figure out that well. I'll just send you the PDFs and links I had. Just a sec. No, no, no. Mm, yes. See, I've sent you a PDF. Just a second. Sent you a PDF. It covers mostly what you'll require to be like a 5 to 6 star in CC. And if you do this consistently, you have to cover all of it. It has most of the things. But I'll give you my personal experience with the PDF. I did it for like 5 to 7 days, and that's when I got tired of it. I learned data structures and algorithms through solving contests. The more number of contests I gave, the more questions I came up with. And whenever I came up with a new question that I could not solve, I would do it. And when you do that question, what I essentially would do is when learning a new question, I made sure that no one could do that concept better than me. And that's essentially what it boils down to is do not go into circular learning that you learn something kacha bakka. You don't know something, either you know something or either you don't know. Don't keep it in the middle. Basically, confidence building obviously comes with uh, 2 or 3 strategies to build confidence is to solve more number of problems, not always viable. Teaching other people is a good way of making sure that you know something, because when you teach someone something, you always get to know that what your loopholes in your theory of something was, and that helps. Mm, Basically, time management is what I covered with academics, and that's probably now how to choose good questions. Basically, what a good question eventually qualifies is you could probably do is what is beyond just little beyond your rating. Let's suppose you're 1200 rated CF, you could pick up 13 rated questions on Codeforces and do them. That qualifies as good question. And what doesn't qualify as good question is basically the question that you could solve already. That you're doing for revisions. If you're just doing for telling yourself that you're doing a number of questions. That doesn't help. That's not a good question. Mm. Development side, I suggest when you get to second year, like third semester, after third semester, focus on development. You'll have to build your resumes as well. When you build your resumes, you'll obviously need some basic development, one or basically two basic projects. So focus on any development stack that you could come up with. Essentially, development can be done in like 2 to 3 months. 2 months for the basic theory and 1 month for a basic project. Development, I cannot suggest that much, but what I did in my time is I learned Stack and Java. I ordered both of them because I was not sure which was better, and I created 2 projects just to build my resume, and that's probably all I did. Okay, second year internships. Actually, what you should do is Google search all of them. I'll tell you a few companies that give you good second year internships. Google STEP internship is the main one. You should focus on that. That's like the main one. Uh, Not to demotivate you, but I'll suggest this for the female candidates here because STEP intern is basically meant to represent the minorities in this case as well. So it like has a better you if you're a female candidate, you have a better chance of getting selected in that. Apart from that, you should apply for internships like uh, Uber has a second year internship. Check out its forms. Uh, I guess Amazon does not have a second year internship. It's only for third years. Second year internships, you'll have Adobe. Adobe offers very good internship. You could probably lack on some of them as I did just due to the pandemic. So in case you're also hit the same way I was for internships in second year, what you could do is probably pick up startups for your internships. They'll not give you that good of a pay or experience, but they'll at least give you some sort of exposure to how the industry works in real life. Uh, Basically, you'll have to follow on building resumes. There are very good YouTubers on YouTube that will explain you how to build a resume. What it essentially should contain is basically your CP achievements, your coursework, your education, and basically what your projects are, any competitions that you won or had decent ranks in, like hackathons or let's say kickstarts or hackacups, decent competitions. You can give good ranks. You cannot just say that I participated in it. You should have decent ranks because I know you second year, so you're going to, when you're going to apply for second year internship, you're not going to have that big of a achievement resume achievements to support your resume, but try not to give more of I participated in this and I participated in this. People do not respond very brightly to those ones. Any other doubts that I could clear with? You have to. Kickstart. You could start with Kickstart straight away. The reason I suggest is people who can do CF, ABC, or even AB can do two problems in Kickstart as well out of the four problems that come in Kickstart rounds generally. Okay, CC and CF confusion. I suggest you do CC. It's a more beginner-friendly platform, lesser number of requirements, and it's more Indian-oriented. So you'll have a lot of more mass to follow around with. When you go to CF, you're supposed to be a little educated before entering that. I'll say that when you're good with basics of number theory, game theory, and PNC, only then you go there and start trying problems. Okay, again to this question, I have no clue what A2J is. I think I've heard someone else also on LinkedIn trying to ask me the same question, and that's my response to it. I have no clue what any of the courses are because I never took them. I still did follow the principle that you do not need courses, you just need reading material, and that's enough. I follow some YouTube channels, and those are the ones I told you. I'll try to give a few links to the YouTube channels as well. Uh, I'll probably provide you with those ones as well. The ones on from which I had my pen. My yeah. So this is like this guy probably only solves mostly Olympiad problems, so that's why I suggest that this is something that you can practice your maths with when you get good at it. It's not generally CP oriented. It's just maths. He's probably solving Olympiad questions. Whatever I ask you to do is when you go out from this meeting, realize something that you do check the top list of candidates that they are on CF and CodeChef. You realize that most of them are from top-notch IITs or colleges, some from even mathematical institutes. Most of them would have some few things in common that their maths is going to be exceptional. Like even if you give them is make them sit in a maths contest, they'll probably figure out really well. And what I need you to realize is that it's nothing fancy. You just add a boost start. You can also do it if given enough dedication to it. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. There will be days that you'll probably do 12 hours of CP as well. But it's okay. Most people go through that. Well, I can't give an exact comparator. I've seen in CC for sure that when I wrote a Java code, it did not pass. When I wrote that code in C++, it did. So I'm not certainly sure that because CC provides a 2x multiplier on that. And I'm not sure Java is exactly 2x lower. I cannot give you the exact solution to your problem, but I suggest that you could learn CP in like 3 to 4 days. Basic syntax is more than enough. If you're good with Java, C++ should be like cakewalk for you because Java is like a lot harder than C++. Well, how to choose good questions? Do look at questions from long challenges. They're really good and really good explanations and discussions about them because people had a lot of time to think about those. So do give a lot of time to long challenge problems, past long challenges problems. You can find them on past contests on CodeChef, or you can on CodeChef you have like the practice section where questions are solved through difficulty level. You can try it that way as well. And basically, what I suggest is CC is more like if you're good at long challenges, you'll obviously get good at the short ones eventually. Basically, first try to build the knowledge, then focus on time limit. You'll get it in time. And like took me to get the things in time. Took me about 21 days maximum. I'm telling you that when I was able, when I could do 5 questions, and when I had to get in time, it took me about 15 to 21 days. But the knowledge required to solve those 5 questions took me about 6 to 7 months, even after that mathematical advantage. That takes time. Any other questions that I should answer? C problems are basically sometimes optimized with some DP strategies. When you study DP, GD, or some maths, you'll understand that you'll stop getting TLEs in those. Because basically, what would happen is you'll start writing brute force codes for C, which obviously wouldn't work. One more thing I suggest is to understand what time complexity is and what the desired solution is. Generally, what the constraints of a problem are given, you understand what the time constraints are. Because let us suppose like n is supposed to be given around a range of 1,000 to 10,000, then it can be assumed that the solution is probably going to be an n square solution. Uh, I guess a side language except for C++ could be the language you choose for development. I, for one, personally suggest for you to target the language you suggest is beneficial for the companies you're targeting. Basically, there are companies that prefer that Python or Flask. There are companies that prefer that Java and probably the Spring framework, or that even companies that prefer nowadays that the Merge stack. In particular, I know for Google that they allow all three of the languages and do not have any particular preference because they have their own languages that you have to learn eventually. And for the small short companies, that comes in handy. For the big companies, generally they'll have their own type of frameworks, proprietary technologies. So you'll not need any certain set of languages that you really need. For a little smaller companies or startups, you have to have certain requirements. So it's essentially on target. You'll have to learn at least one language for development apart from C++. Development in C++ doesn't work really well. See, right now you can only get proof of techniques for problem C. So uh, what essentially it means is that basically um, you are probably lacking somewhere in the algorithm part, or you're trying to think the problem the wrong way. Because sometimes what I realize is the C problem requires some simplification. You're just not supposed to tackle the problem straight away. Some kind of simplification is required. That this problem is equivalent to solving this problem, and now I can solve this problem, so this problem is also solved. Basically, let us suppose you can solve a problem X, and you get a problem Y which can be transformed into S. That is how basically CP works: is breaking down your problem to such a part where you can solve it. Basically, to optimize your code, what happens is when you come with a brute force solution, it will be of complexity of n square, n cube, or even 2 to the power n. Then using some data structures, you can get that complexity down in some cases, or using some algorithms, you can get those complexities down to a ridiculous amount. There are algorithms that will help you get n cube complexities turned to n log n, and it will be even O of n. There's an algorithm known as an algorithm which gets an O n cube knowledge algorithm to O of n. So basically, what it comes down to is first come to building that brute force solution, except the 2 power n solution, obviously. It's like trying all sets and all possibilities. When you come with that kind of a brute force solution, then it comes down to how good you are at data structures and algorithm and reducing that complexity. Okay, I'll probably have to end this because I have to go. If you have any more doubts, just hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll probably reply you as soon as I can. And I guess what I suggest is from the resources I just give you, try to follow the PDF as far as possible. If you outgrow that, do let me know. I'll provide you with further knowledge, further resources. CP Algo is a very good resource. If you are able to manage all the contents of CP Algo, you'll fare out like this even better than I could. Yeah, basically optimizing codes, you don't need to think something out of the box. It's just basically trying to fit your proof of solution into your existing codes, into your existing algorithm.
Okay, I would like to admit my thoughts. A good event ends in the world. They take only a pause and keep us waiting for the next. So, first, we would like to thank our chief guest for the day, Sarthak Gupta Bhaiya. Thank you, sir, for reserving time from your busy schedule and making this event a success.
And also a big thank you to awesome and patient audience. Now we would like to sign off. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, guys, for attending. Bye for now.
Thank you.